Friends, this is one of the biggest scandals ever to hit Britain. And I know you've seen this story in the news over the last 24 hours and you think you have the full picture, but I'd be surprised if you actually do. More than any other video that I've ever made, I really implore you to watch this all the way to the end because I promise that you will be stunned by this. Yes, the British state has been secretly smuggling tens of thousands of people out of Afghanistan and into Britain. And they've been doing so whilst taking extraordinary measures to make sure that you never find out about it. But really, that's not the full story. The real story is that thousands of the Afghans that the British state smuggled into our country and placed into your neighbourhoods had previously had their asylum claims rejected. Why? Well, in many cases because they were found to have previous criminal histories, and a lot of them have gone on to commit some very serious crimes here in Britain. The real story is that despite the narrative the media and politicians want to push at you, a very tiny percentage of them actually served with the British forces. The real story is that these Afghans now have housing for life in our country paid for by the taxpayer. And the real story is that despite all of that and everything we've done for them, they're now going to sue us. Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's go back to the start of this and I'll try and make the whole thing as clear and simple as possible. In 2021, Afghanistan collapses to the Taliban. It turns out that 20 years of war fighting in that country, countless British soldiers who lost their lives, billions of pounds spent to try and westernize the country, well, it was pointless. They didn't want that. They weren't willing to fight to defend it. Anyway, a few months later, a Royal Marine who was working presumably in the Foreign Office, helping them to process asylum claims, made a bit of a mistake. He sent a spreadsheet containing the list of thousands of Afghan applicants back to the Afghan applicants themselves. So now each of them had the details for every other applicant. If just one of them was willing to leak that to the Taliban, that's very bad. A pretty big oath, let's be honest. So what was the response from the British state? Well, they decided that they were now going to have to bring everyone on that list to the UK. And that included 25,000 people who had previously had their asylum claims rejected. Why were their claims rejected? Were they lying? Were they criminals? Were they found to have had absolutely no connection to the UK whatsoever? Well, it didn't matter because they were coming now and the projected cost, £7 billion. Now, the government didn't want you to know what was going on, so they filed a super injunction. Now, a super injunction is a really powerful tool. You go to the courts and you say, hey, this information cannot be made public, and anyone who makes this information public should be liable under the law. It's different from a normal injunction because with a super injunction, you're not even allowed to talk about the fact that an injunction even exists. It's a great tool if there's something you want to cover up, for example, like, I don't know, you're bringing 100,000 Afghans to the UK and it's going to cost £7 billion. That sort of thing. To fully understand just how sneaky this super injunction is, here's an excerpt from the Daily Mail who attended a secret court hearing where the injunction was being reviewed. November 11th, 2024. Another secret court hearing attended by the Mail. Mr. Justice Chamberlain, the judge, asks, I'm starting to doubt myself. Am I going bonkers? As he queries the vast cost to taxpayers. Government lawyers tell the judge they are working on a plan to manage public knowledge and control the narrative. That doesn't sound very democratic, does it? Maybe at this point you're thinking to yourself, well, okay, they're coming to the UK, but at least they've been vetted. They won't have any prior convictions for crime. They won't be total wrong-uns, will they? Well, not quite.
I mean, the idea that the government might have secretly flown in like a offender and plonked them in someone's area. I mean, were these people even vetted properly?
Some were, some weren't, is my gut feeling. And it's quite clear also that, like you, I've been reading the fact there are some people who we gave a very firm no to because of those sorts of reasons and are now in anyway. And you can pretty much guarantee, oh, look, I wish all these people who serve with us are deeply honourable and actually become good British citizens. Like you, I worry that quite a few won't, and quite a few have, you know, either an Afghan or, you know, a Pashtun culture, which has a very different set of and moral and ethical mores than what is acceptable in this country. And that's why people are angry, and I feel that anger.
All right, so what would be a telltale sign that these individuals were not vetted appropriately? Well, why don't we take a look at the crime statistics for how the Afghans have been getting on here in the UK. Thanks to a Freedom of Information request that was subsequently republished in the Telegraph a few months ago, we know that Afghans have been committing offences in Britain at a rate about 22 or 23 times higher than native Brits. That is completely shocking. What this means is that the British state was smuggling Afghans into the country, all the while it knew that these same people they were bringing into the country were committing vastly higher rates of crime, not just but also violent. And they were doing that whilst making sure you didn't know about it, but that you were paying for it. What the fuck? There's something I want to add here, by the way, which is that the state knew this would happen. They knew that by bringing a whole bunch of Afghans to the UK, the number of very serious crimes, particularly would increase. They knew this. The culture of Afghanistan has been very well known and documented for a long time. Most of you know that I was in the British Army, and speaking to some of the soldiers who deployed there, the stories they told me would make you shiver. I cannot repeat those stories here on YouTube because I would have to censor every other word. It really, really is that bad. But if you want to learn a little bit more, there's an article that was published in the Telegraph in 2011, so 14 years ago, titled "Something Ophilia," fill in the blanks, is totally normalised in the south of Afghanistan. So this culture difference, right, was fully understood by the state. They knew what it was like in Afghanistan when they decided to bring those people with that culture to the UK. So they knew that these kinds of crimes were going to increase, and they did it anyway. Frankly, that is treasonous. And I don't say that to spur on some kind of vigilante justice or reprisals. No, that's ridiculous. Don't go and do that. I say that because in the future, when normality returns to Britain, when sensible heads prevail, when we win, a lot of people who have made some very awful decisions that have affected people in terrible, terrible ways need to be held to account. They need to be brought into the courts and answer questions and face justice. Because honestly, this is completely disgusting. What has happened to our country? It's not right, it's criminal. Listen, brace yourselves, because I'm about to add a lot of salt to the wound here, and it's going to hurt. So the Afghans arrive in the UK, and the British government sets up something called Operation Warm Welcome. Now, as a part of Operation Warm Welcome, the Afghans are entitled to permanent housing for the rest of their lives. Paid for by who, you ask? Well, you, the taxpayer. So whilst you can't afford a house in Britain, because let's face it, they're very expensive and wages are very low, and partly because you're paying a 40, maybe 50% tax rate, the government is taking those taxes and buying or building houses to give them to people from 8,000 miles away who arrived a year ago. That's so wrong. That is so wrong. There is no social contract left in Britain. I'm not finished adding salt to the wound, by the way, because after all that we have done for the people that we brought here, spilling blood and treasure in Afghanistan, trying to build them a country worth living in, and you would have thought worth fighting for, after all of that, we take them into our country and they're suing us. They're trying to sue us for £1 billion. I say they're trying to sue us, I really do mean that, because again, it's the taxpayer who will foot that bill. This is just so wrong, isn't it? This is just, everything is wrong about this. Everything is wrong about this. Anyway, I saw an article which said that the British government is now terrified there's going to be more riots in the country because the super injunction was lifted and the British public finally learnt about all of this. And I just have to put in here, I do not want you to go and riot. I think it's really, really silly. Sure, go and protest, make your voices heard, but you can do so without burning things down or throwing rocks at people, okay? That's not really going to achieve anything, because very quickly, the message is no longer about the thing that you were trying to protest, and it's all just about the violence and the disorder that's being caused. So I don't think that even really helps the cause, if I'm being totally honest. But what I will say back to the government is this. If you're worried that you keep doing things that's causing the British people to be so angry that they go and burn their own cities down, maybe you should just have a think about why you're doing those things in the first place. This is meant to be a democracy where you represent the British people, but it feels like what's actually happening in the state is they're doing everything for everyone else other than the British people. The British people are the cash cow. We pay the taxes. We are the productive people who provide you the money. And then you say, give £35 billion to Mauritius, right? Over some past colonial nonsense. Alternatively, you're spending £7 billion to bring Afghans to the UK. If some tiny little African country says something about net zero, you'll probably give them a couple of £1 billion to help them along with it. And of course, all of that money will just be lost to corruption. is totally insane. This country cannot go on like this. The society, the state that we have built, partly because it's just a massive welfare state, and partly because we are going bankrupt. We're over £3 trillion in debt, which for our country is huge. This is going to collapse. And I said this in the last video, but I really hope that you've got some spare tins of food and some spare tins of fuel. I'm not saying you have to go full prepper, but I do see that bad things could be coming to this country in the future, whether it's rolling power cuts or it's civil unrest. I really don't know. Again, I'll say it because, you know, it's obvious and it's true. Please don't go out and deliberately cause civil unrest. Don't go out rioting. All that's going to happen is you're going to get yourself thrown into prison for an extraordinarily long time. It's not worth it. Don't do it. Resist peacefully. Anyway, let me know what you guys think of all of this. I think I've probably got a fairly good idea of what your opinions are likely to be. This is such a huge story that I think people don't fully understand the depths of, that I'm going to do everything I can to try and get some other bigger YouTubers to take a look at this story and to cover it. One I have in mind in particular is Smuggled, who I spend way too much time watching because he's really level-headed and he just has like really balanced takes, and I really like this. But I think he'll look at this story and he'll be like, yeah, what the fuck is going on in Britain? Anyway, please do leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and hopefully I'll see you in a future video. Look, don't worry friends, this isn't going to last forever. It can't last forever. This will come to a head. We will fix this. We will make Britain strong again. Just, you have to stay strong in the meantime. Right, see you in a future video. Look how easy it would be to lose this dog in these fields. She's the exact same colour. It's a good thing she's well behaved. Annie, sit. Sit. Good girl. Wait. See, she's a very well behaved dog. You are the light of my life. Come on.